Have you ever wondered how Medicaid blend into long-term care, senior care, and what the state provides? We have a special guest helping us with all those questions. Stick around.
Welcome to Senior Care Made Simple, an elder care podcast, your guide to navigating home health care with confidence. Hosted by Andrea Albertini, founder and CEO of Horizon Care Services, an industry leader in private duty home care in South Florida. To learn more, visit horizoncareservices.com.
This is Senior Care Made Simple podcast. Thank you for joining us this morning or this afternoon or this evening. I always end up saying that because I never know who's listening and where you are in the world. And I am here with Lucy Torres, my co-host.
Hello, everyone.
And today we have an amazing attorney from Doane Doane, attorney of law, Jeremy Soffler. And he is going to be talking about what's Medicaid, when is Medicaid need, how do you go about it, and also to be able to share with our listeners that there's so many other choices other than I'm going to put my mom in a nursing home. There is a lot into that, and we're going to talk about it along the way. So I'm going to let Jeremy get started. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.
Thank you for the introduction, and I really appreciate being here today. So you're right. We're going to talk about Medicaid today and how we can leverage that program and the long-term care benefits under that big Medicaid umbrella to help care for our loved ones, whether we're talking about help at home, being placed in an assisted living facility or a skilled nursing facility or nursing home, because Medicaid can provide assistance at each of those levels of care for our loved ones. Medicaid has a lot of myths and misconceptions, so I think it's helpful to present the information in the kind of following chunks, like what Medicaid benefits are available at the 3 levels of care, what Medicaid rules are for financial eligibility, how they might apply, and different fact patterns we could go through, simplifications, of course, and then like timetables for an application. And I think that'll probably, for somebody who's hearing it for the first time, that'll be a good introduction to this topic. So starting off, there are 3 levels of care: home, assisted living, and skilled nursing. And again, some simplification here, but assisted living tend to runs $3,000 to $6,000 a month, $7,000 to $8,000 if you're talking about memory care, and then skilled nursing is more in the $10,000 to $15,000 a month range for private, and that might be a semi-private room. In fact, at home, as you're well aware of, it really is quite a wide range that families are spending for their loved ones at home per month. Medicaid can help address each of those levels of care in different ways. So starting at home, Medicaid provides about 25 hours a week of home health aides, incontinence supplies, durable medical equipment, speech and occupational therapy, life alert, transportation to doctor's visits, adult daycare, transportation to and from adult daycare, nutrition assistance, so like Meals on Wheels. Sometimes they even prep meals for the whole family, actually. Those 25 hours a week or so of home health aides is the primary benefit you're going to see, and that's a range, and that's going to change based on the evaluation. The Medicaid program you're interacting with will allot for you, and it can grow over time, but that's a good conservative estimate of what you might see for a family member.
So one of the things that, we hear a lot, Jeremy, in our business, and we touched base before we went in the air, is families are they don't plan for long-term care. They don't buy long-term care insurance. They don't save for it. They don't invest on stock market or whatever the case may be for it. And some of them do. Even the ones who do and don't, if you're not in a healthcare world, if you're not in our industry, It's like, oh my God, my mom needs home care.
Right.
Oh my God, I can't leave my mom home alone. My dad, I can't leave my dad home alone. Oh, we're going to put him in a nursing home. Because a lot of people don't understand that there is options.
That's right. The Medicaid program expanded from just providing assistance at the nursing home level of care to a program that also covered the community, and they consider the community home care and assisted living care because it's actually financially more feasible for them to provide that assistance for somebody who's living in the community versus having to pay almost all the full freight of a nursing home bed. And you're right, with the more proactive the family is in getting help earlier on, you're going to, reduce the fall risks, and, you're going to also, it's going to make the process of staying at home and, potentially transitioning into institutionalization at some point much smoother if you're planning ahead. And even for the planners, I'd say a third of my clients already had long-term care program, insurance, but those benefits can be limited, not really cover all their needs as they grow over time. So it can be a game changer for anybody to look into Medicaid planning for a loved one.
Absolutely. Going back to what you mentioned about Medicaid covering costs for home health care as well as for the assisted living. So I think the misconception or misunderstanding, confusion comes from a lot of people think Medicaid is that gold card that just pays if you go to the doctor. So now when we talk about Medicaid, it's kind of differentiating for them the difference between that card and how Medicaid can pay for community services for assisted living or in the home.
That's right. So Medicaid is a portfolio of programs, big umbrella, and the programs we're talking about, not to get too far into the weeds, we're talking about the home and community-based services Medicaid. That's what provides help at home and assisted living. And then ICP or institutional care program Medicaid, that's what helped cover the nursing home bed. But you're right. The gold card is, what you normally think of. Health insurance is what you normally think of when you think of Medicaid, but it's much more than that. People just aren't aware of it. And you mentioned, how Medicaid provides help at assisted living. That's correct. Medicaid can help cover the care portion of the monthly rent. So, if just a simplification, but, and it's more of a spectrum than a specific number. But you're going to see Medicaid cover about $2,000 of the monthly rent at an assisted living facility. And it's up to the applicant, the Medicaid recipient at that point, to cover the difference. So, just kind of a simple numbers here, but like, let's say the bed is $6,000 a month. The applicant's income is $4,000 a month. Medicaid could cover that $2,000 gap.
Okay. And there's a process, though, to get qualified, as well as there are not all assisted livings are contract to take Medicaid.
That's right. So, not every, I'd say it's a smaller net of assisted living facilities that participates in the Medicaid program versus, skilled nursing, which is the next level up. At almost all nursing homes have at least some Medicaid beds.
Yeah.
Some have more than others, but almost all nursing homes do. And just before we move on to your point about, I just want to mention that what Medicaid provides at the nursing home level of care is actually the most robust benefit. They're going to cover room, board, and care. The recipient's personal, monthly co-payment, so to speak, is their income, which is usually, Social Security, pension, IRA distributions, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But that's what they consider the income that's going to go to the facility to help pay for that share of cost. And the recipient gets to keep $160 as an allowance for
which
current
cover
numbers.
toiletries and things like
haircuts, all
items.
that fun stuff. So those are the benefits from a high level that Medicaid can provide for somebody who's trying to looking into the program. And then the next point is, well, how do you qualify for those benefits? And sometimes people are coming very late to the party to have that conversation, there's already been significant spend down of assets before we even, start having this conversation. And in many instances, it's completely preventable. If we're starting earlier than later. So moving on to the financial conditions of eligibility, there's two components: asset cap and income cap eligibility. The income cap right now, it's always moving every 6 months or so. The income cap's around $3,000 a month. If you're over that cap as the applicant, you need to create a cure. And that cure is one of two types of trusts. One is a qualified income trust, or some people call it a Miller trust, or alternatively using a pooled trust to transfer excess income into it. So if you have let's say your income's $4,000 a month, you're $1,000 over the income cap. Every month when your income hits your checking account, we have to move at least $1,000. We'd probably move greater than that just to be on the safe side. Transfer that over to, usually we use a qualified income trust. Once the income's over there, your income cap cured. Now, but if you're on Medicaid, you're going to be using that income to help cover living expenses, or if you're in assisted living or skilled nursing. If you're at home, those funds in a qualified income trust should be used for covering private duty aids or other unreimbursed medical expenses. But that cure, that movement of the money, the excess income into that qualified income trust, cures the excess income issue. A pooled trust can work similarly. Most people find, though, moving back to the asset cap problem, that's usually where most people get tripped up with the complexities of qualifying for Medicaid, and they wind up spending down rather than looking for alternative solutions before they get to that point. So the first thing to understand about Medicaid is the 5-year look back. So Medicaid looks back at any gifts or transfers for less than fair market value made within the last 5 years prior to an application. What they're trying to determine is, did you make any transfers, and you need to self-report those when you file the application. Based on the size of that transfer, there's going to be a denial, a penalty period up to 5 years. Not a crime or a fine, it's just a penalty period before you can receive the benefits we discussed. So if it's, for an easy number, $50,000, you gave $50,000 to your children 4 years before you applied, you'd have to report that. And the penalty didn't run at the time you made the transfer for that 4 years ago. It runs when you file the application, report the transfer, and then you take the penalty period. So the thing about Medicaid planning is to understand any prior gifts and figure out a way to recharacterize those transfers as something else so that we can avoid a penalty period, because in most instances, people can't wait to apply. Some people do come very early on to me, and they want to, plan very far and very proactive in the future. And they say, I have this sum of money and I want to make sure I can qualify for Medicaid. What's our best bet? Well, it might be a strategic transfer of assets to usually, other family members in the form of a family trust. So we establish a trust and we transfer the assets to intentionally trigger the 5-year penalty period. Therefore, after that penalty period runs, there's not going to be a issue with those funds. They're not going to have to be reported on the application. They don't count anymore. So gifting, strategic gifting, is a great solution to look at if we're being very proactive, and some clients are. But a lot of clients are not in that position, and they need to think of other ways to avoid a gifting penalty period. So everyone's situation is different, and an applicant's marital status has a big part of the asset cap rules.
I get asked that a lot.
Yeah. So for a single applicant, they have an asset cap of $2,000, excluding a home, which is around up to $700,000 or so, and a car. They can also have other little things like non-refundable funeral expenses, a checking account dedicated to covering other funeral expenses up to $2,500. So, but $2,000, is the quick rule to remember: $2,000 in total assets.
And also, I want to remind the listeners, we're talking right now about Florida law.
That's a great point. Yes, the rules I'm discussing are Florida specific. Medicaid planning is a marriage of federal and state law. So a perfect example of that is the income cap issue I mentioned earlier. So Florida Florida wanted to limit the pool of Medicaid applicants by creating the income cap rule, that $3,000 cap I mentioned. Federal government didn't like that, so they created these, quote unquote loopholes of a qualified income trust to still allow people to become eligible for Medicaid benefits. So, absolutely, the rules I'm talking about are Florida specific, and you'd want to consult with an attorney in the specific state you're looking to apply to for your loved one. Where they're going to actually be when they're filing that application, receiving those benefits.
And one question, and this may have to lead into another show.
Yeah.
What happens to that person or individuals that were financially exploited and now they come to you and need to apply for Medicaid and they can't justify a certain amount of time, certain amount of money that's no longer there?
Well, if they were exploited, and we have documentation of that, that would be submitted along with the application. And somebody who's defrauded they didn't make a gift. They're not subject to a gifting penalty period. We'd have to document and explain that in the application. But we do have those come up, and we're not. We would still be able to get the application processed.
That's great. If anyone listening hasn't started any planning by now, what's the first step they should take?
The first step they should really be taking is getting a basic estate plan in order, because a lot of the times we're starting to have the Medicaid planning conversation with a loved one who doesn't have any of the basics in hand, meaning a power of attorney and healthcare surrogate. So if you don't have those, then you can't even do any of the financial and medical decision-making you need to do for your loved one. So you got to have those before you get into the Medicaid planning, which is kind of like estate planning on steroids, with a different goal of creating financial eligibility. But you need the basics in place so that you can do that type of planning. And with those documents, as if they're properly created, you can use the power of attorney to create the legal documents you need to get eligible for Medicaid. So that's step one. And if you don't have those documents, then we've got to go through the whole guardianship rigmarole, which is a very complicated, convoluted, time-extensive process that lasts the whole life of the ward in that case. So any basic estate planning is better than nothing.
So to mention that, I'm so glad we're talking about that actually right now. So we have a patient that was referred to us by a rehab facility. Patient were going home, needed around the clock care. Anyway, long story short, patient is probably about 60% demented. There's no trust. There's no will. There's no money. There's no healthcare surrogate. Absolutely nothing. So in order for us to keep this client safe, we had to, so the family doesn't want to take responsibility at all, right, for this client. So for now, what we needed to do is call Adult Protective Services so they can take over this client until we were going to call you to be able to see what we could do in a case like that, because we're trying to get the family to take guardianship of her or to be the healthcare surrogate to be able to help this client.
Right. Yeah. And it's a very tough situation when the family isn't willing to act because DCF is, overwhelmed. And DCF is the Department of Children and Families, is what runs Adult Protective Services. It's a very strained department, and to ask them to be the party that initiates the guardianship proceeding, they can, but frequently, it's going to protract the process quite profoundly when you need to get those services in place as soon as possible. So, it's a very tough situation when there's nobody who wants to step up and file the petition, and get the court aware of a ward in need. So getting back to the point of having a basic estate plan in place, it's absolutely critical when you're talking about getting into the discussion of Medicaid planning and trying to preserve assets. Because, once you get the guardianship court involved, those assets are going to get depleted much more rapidly. There's just a lot of costs, a lot of hands involved in a case like that. A lot of the and courts will be deferential even if a guardianship's open. They will be deferential to an attorney trying to do Medicaid planning, get that client eligible, and allow us to do some planning to protect the assets and create eligibility. But it's going to create more delay. It's going to preserve the money, erode the money we were trying to save. Having a basic estate planning is absolutely critical. What I'd like to do is get back to the rules for eligibility. And we were previously talking about asset cap eligibility for a single applicant who has the $2,000 home, car, funeral expenses. How do you make them eligible is going to be really dependent on what kind of assets they have. And the same applies for a married couple, but we'll talk about that in a minute. If that single person's assets are primarily retirement accounts, it actually creates some great opportunities for us to create eligibility without not really changing or manipulating all that much. Because Medicaid views assets as either an income stream or an asset. So for instance, if that person is already at retirement age and taking the required minimum distribution one time a year, we take it instead of one time a year, we divide it into 12 equal monthly installments. And guess what? That creates an income stream. So they're only looking at the income that's coming out of that retirement account instead of the $800,000 IRA. So you don't have the asset cap problem anymore. Now, you did increase that person's income every month, which has that income cap problem I mentioned with the $3,000, but there's a cure for that too. There's the income cap trust, qualified income trust, there's the Miller trust. So you can, if it's retirement accounts, they're really just doing what we call a monthly payout mode on those types of accounts. We can create immediate eligibility without transferring assets to somebody else, without triggering a penalty period, without changing assets out of the person's name, the recipient's name. When they die, who has ever designated to receive those funds will receive them without being subject to Medicaid's lien at death. So retirement accounts create a great opportunity for planning for Medicaid-wise. Let's say they're not. They're non-qualified funds. They're in an investment account, a brokerage account. Let's just use the number $50,000 again, right? So somebody's trying to qualify for Medicaid. They don't want to wait a gifting penalty period. How do you get the funds from the applicant out without triggering a penalty period? A lot of different solutions. One we often utilize is a personal service contract. And so what this is an employment agreement between the Medicaid applicant and usually a family member, typically a child. And we're calling them the healthcare advocate, healthcare watchdog through the agreement. And with a calculation, a formula we build in, we explain how they're going to provide services for the remainder of the applicant's lifetime. Usually, by way of that formula, we can transfer the entire balance of that $50,000 over to the child. And with that contract, that compensation agreement, it's no longer a gift, it's compensation. So we're not triggering a penalty period. And we're doing this with full transparency to DCF, who's reviewing our application. We walk them through the transfer of, and with the statements and the contract, and we walk them through that entire transaction, and we can create eligibility instantaneously without a gifting penalty period, and we could keep the funds liquid. And they're still in the family, still controlled by the family, not subject to Medicaid payback at death because they're already in the child's name in that instance. Not going to be go through probate because they're not in the applicant's name because they're already in the kid's name. So there's a lot of positives to that type of solution. But every solution we present will have some kind of downsides. With a personal service contract, for instance, we're calling it compensation to DCF. Well, that's going to be income in the year received to the applicant. Now, that's going to be not going to be money out of the child's pocket to cover the difference in increased tax liability, but it's going to reduce the amount that we were able to transfer and save.
Jeremy, you have given so much great
Amazing
information, like your wealth of knowledge.
Oh, thanks.
And this is so great that you mentioned the correct way of doing this, because I think that some may think, well, if we start getting rid of this money, then they're not going to see it. And there is the right way of doing it where it doesn't cause any penalties, as you mentioned.
Get an attorney involved earlier, and it'll make it cleaner, and we can protect the money with full transparency and still create eligibility. There's no need to, spend down unnecessarily, make early gifts to grandkids. We can preserve the money and make it and let it stay in one place so that it can help support that applicant, that Medicaid recipient at that point, throughout the remainder of their life. I mean, that's the point of it. Provide for that recipient and, hopefully leave a legacy for their family. So,
Well, we are so grateful that you came today. And I hope that the listeners were able to get a lot of information, even though we're talking about Florida law. Every state has their own law. So we would recommend you to see a trust attorney that does trust, wills, and things like that, and Medicaid planning for you to learn more information, whatever state you are in. And also, if any of you have any questions, any topics you would like for us to talk about it, please email us at seniorcaremade-simple-podcast@gmail.com. And if anyone in Florida is looking for more information, Doane Doane, Jeremy Soffler.
Yes, thank you.
All his information will be down on the show notes. And again, if you missed the show notes, please email us at seniorcaremade-simple-podcast@gmail.com. And thank you, Jeremy, Lucy. This was amazing. I really would love to be able to hear any feedback of any of the listeners. I would love to have Jeremy here again within the next couple of weeks, whenever he's available. I really want him to talk about trust, wills, healthcare surrogate, and how important the component is. It is very, very important. So stay tuned, and we'll let you know next time Jeremy is coming to talk to us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Senior Care Made Simple, an elder care podcast, has been brought to you by Horizon Care Services, your private duty choice in home care in South Florida. For more information on acquiring home care assistance, visit horizoncareservices.com.